So the disclosure letter made it easier for us to commit fraud and go down that path because we told ourselves UBS was behind us. And we talk about a lesson in responsibility, which I think could help you in the corporate world, maybe. We talk about, in prison, I read a lot of work talking about how working in groups can tend to reduce our sense of responsibility or weaken it to a fraction. I'll tell you, I knew it was wrong to create that disclosure letter because of why we were doing it. But working in a group, I told myself my senior partner is behind it. And my branch manager, who's got 3 decades more in the industry, is behind it. So of course I knew it was wrong, the reasoning behind the letter. I knew it. But everyone else was okay with it. And I just figured if everyone else was okay with it, then I'm okay with it too. And sometimes when you make decisions in groups, it's very easy to make the wrong decision. I don't blame them, just at the time I thought it was the right decision. Yes?
Did your manager ever
Yeah.
have to set a time or anything like that?
My client received 5 years in prison. Actually, when I mentioned that I was going to do 7 years, my client too, he got himself indicted on new charges, believe it or not. A terrible mistake when you're cooperating with the feds. He was caught telling someone how to lie to the FBI agent that he was cooperating with. So they ripped up his plea agreement, and they ripped up his plea agreement. He was sentenced to 5 years. My branch manager did not go to prison, but he was fired. Compliance manager did not go to prison, but he was fired. A lot of guys out of New York were fired. Some of the guys in my case got a big break because the U.S. attorney that secured my plea went into private practice shortly after, took a big job at a defense firm in Los Angeles. So it's sort of like when you inherit an account in the brokerage industry, it's not your relationship, you may not treat it as well. The new U.S. attorney that came on board that inherited my case kind of said, you know what, I'm going to let the SEC and the lawsuits go after the rest of these guys. What we have on the books is what we have on the books. But in my sentencing hearing, my judge was adamant and questioned why others weren't up there facing the gavel with me. And it's in part because my partner cooperated early and the U.S. attorney went into private practice. That was a really big break for him. But my business partner is still there. He still manages money at UBS, which is troubling to a lot of people. Yes?
Do you have a relationship with anyone that you went through this whole experience with? You said you're private press. Do you have a relationship with anyone?
I tried. I tried very hard. But his name never became public. He was never indicted. He interviewed with the FBI. He did well. We have a ton of mutual friends, which is kind of uncomfortable. You know, Facebook nowadays and running into the same circles, and it's like, so-and-so. And I'm like, oh, it's my best friend for 15 years. We can't be friends. We can't talk. We don't do anything. He's so traumatized by it. So no, we're not friends. My client, of course, we don't communicate. My senior business partner and I, unfortunately, still have a contentious relationship. I tried to, he reached out to me in prison. I thought it was to welcome me home or almost coming home and applaud me on my efforts to atone in prison, but he threatened to sue me because I had mentioned his name in a blog. I wrote his name, and he told a friend of mine that he had suffered enough, and he was losing business by virtue of my writing his name, and that if I didn't remove his name, he'd sue me. And then I didn't remove it, of course, because like I said, I had nothing to lose. I was in jail. I didn't care. So then I wrote it again. And then I wrote it again, and then he called, and he called my same partner, business partner, and said, well, tell Justin, not only am I going to sue him, then I'm going to sue his mother, because we didn't have the internet in prison. My mom was entering the blogs. And then I said, you know, you don't mess with my mom. You don't mess with my mom after all I put her through. So then, out of pettiness and vengeance and anger and revenge, still, I'm not perfect. I have a long way to go. I wrote a lot of blogs. I read a lot of blogs. I mentioned his name a lot. And then finally, he came crying, asking me to remove it. And I said, I can no longer be bought. I'm sorry. You've dug your own hole. You shouldn't have threatened to sue my mom. You shouldn't. You don't threaten my mom. And you don't. Come on, it's our mothers. So his name remains. But since I'm home, I was going to say I haven't referenced him, but that would be a lie. I've written about him once. Only after he ran into a friend of mine that he said, see, I'm not perfect, okay? I have a long way to go. He ran into a friend of mine that said, I'm disappointed in Justin. I tried to mentor him. I tried to train him. I'm disappointed this happened. That was a total lie. So I said, okay, let's write a little bit. The pen is the greatest weapon. It's indeed mightier than the sword, I guarantee it. The pen has many friends. It has allies. It has soldiers that get out and work and spread. And I didn't do it to hurt him, but I did it to prove a point. Keep your mouth shut. You got away with an indictment and a felony plea and prison term. You still have your job at UBS. You inherited a book of business that I helped build. Your income doubled the day I was fired. Shut up. So we don't talk. Yeah. Yeah, I was never cut out to manage money. I hated the responsibility of managing money, being beholden to clients day and night. I just didn't like it. I hated dealing with losses. I hated calling a client, telling them that they had lost money or I had underperformed. I hated negotiating commissions back and forth if they thought it was too high. I was never cut out to manage money. The problem is, by the time I realized I was never cut out to manage money, I was making too much money. And sometimes you'll be in a career where you don't like it, but you're making just enough you can't leave. And that's the case. At 24, making $250,000, or 25, making $250,000, that's a significant amount of money at any time in your life. And that's before I was engaged in fraud or facilitating anything. I worked day and night. I worked, but I hated it. So the money was great. It was so great that I couldn't leave. But I have a degree from USC in psychology. I was due to go to graduate school. And I was a very good writer at USC, and I just stopped writing, and I just grew addicted to the brokerage business. I just grew addicted to it. The money, that is, not necessarily the job. You have to do something you like, and I didn't, unfortunately. Holley, go ahead, please. Yes, that's worth noting. I should have mentioned it, but I didn't. Thank you. Total losses on my clock were about $8.4 million. UBS wrote a check for their role in the disclosure letter and turning the other way. UBS wrote a check for about $8 million, plus the legal fees. So $8 million. My criminal restitution was about, I want to say $414,000. The rest came to me. UBS, I think, out of spite, said we're not going to write a check for the whole thing. Of course they could. We're not going to write a check for the whole thing. We'll cover $8 million. The balance goes to me. And I gave $100,000 before I went to prison. I paid about I owe about $200,000. So I paid about $214 of it since I went to prison. So I owe $200. The second part, yes, every book I sell, every speech I give, every consulting client I retain, a good portion of it goes to the U.S. government to pay my restitution. And I think I was told that no one has made greater efforts based on what I make, based on what I turn over with my debt and income. Few have made as great an effort to pay down their restitution as I have. And the court applauds that. They appreciate that. And I hope the victims appreciate it too. And some of them wrote me in prison, which was very satisfying. I received from letters telling me, though they're not pleased with what I did, they applaud my efforts to try to work towards something better. And I saved them and I cherished them. That was a big deal. And something that few white-collar offenders receive inside a federal prison. A letter from a victim wishing you the best and hoping that you have a better future. And it's very significant. It was probably the best one It was a nice thing. Sure. Besides speaking, which I'm not doing as much, I won't write another book, I don't think. I'm executive director of a nonprofit foundation. A gentleman by the name of Michael Santos has been in prison since 1987. He received 45 years for a nonviolent drug crime, of which he'll do 25 years. He's in his 24th consecutive year of prison. I met him at Taft Camp. He helped shape my experience. He has mentored probably 20,000 prisoners in his time teaching a reentry class. So I formed a nonprofit foundation aimed at reentry. So together we've created a program. We go back into jails and prisons. He's still in prison. He's teaching it there with support of the administration. And I spend my days managing this nonprofit foundation, fundraising, going out into the community and speaking, bringing in other men that I serve time with, some of the drug offenders who serve 20 years. May be able to relate to an audience that I can't, but we have this facilitation process and this guide. So that's what I do. I manage a nonprofit foundation in Los Angeles named after my friend Michael Santos, who's been in jail since 1987. That's how I spend my time. Yes?